Today on the Crisscross Cinema Podcast, not one, but two dark comedies for Spooky Month on the Crisscross Cinema Podcast.
Two fellows meet accidentally, like you and me. No connection between them at all, never saw each other before. They swap murders. Crisscross.
Wilson! I'm sorry, Wilson! A day may come when the courage of men fails, but it is not this day.
You gotta keep breathing, because tomorrow the sun will rise. Who knows what the tide could bring?
Hello and welcome to the Crisscross Cinema Podcast, where we crisscross cinema history to find connections that elude the casual eye. Try and spot them along with us. Today, on our special Halloween episode, will we die of fright or laughter? With Frank Capra's Arsenic and Old Lace, 1944, and Alfred Hitchcock's The Trouble with Harry, 1955. Hi, I'm Aaron Wilson, writer, director, and dark comedy enthusiast.
And I'm Mark Klobus, hoping that we do not have a boring podcast. Sorry, I just had to get that out of my system.
Well, now it's out. Okay, if you'd like to get access to bonus features and deleted clips from Crisscross and our sister show, Facets of Story, please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Transcend Entertainment. That's TRANSCEND Entertainment. Today, just as always, we'll review our two films, and then we go crisscross to compare and contrast. But first, Mark, what media has been spooking you?
I have been going through a nostalgia indulgence, and I am so excited to have discovered this. When I was young, I remembered
Dinosaur days.
Yes, dinosaur days. You know, we on we had a stone TV set like the kind you see in the Flintstones, and but so when I was growing up, there was this. I had this distinct memory of a TV show called QED, and it was for some reason the music stuck with me, a couple of images stuck with me. And yet it's something I had never really dislodged. And of course, the internet being what it is, you know, I knew about it and everything, but I had never really been able to find it. Partially because I hadn't really done a deep dive, but I never came across DVDs of it because none had ever been released. I never came across VHS releases because none had ever been released. And last week, I was just, doing a random search, and I decided why not. I typed it in, and I found it. All 6 of the episodes that were done are available on YouTube. And I thought,
I knew you were going to say YouTube.
Yeah. The things I hate to mention, because I feel like if you mention that it's on YouTube, at some point, some entertainment lawyer with some company is going to hear this, realize, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that was out there. And pretty soon there's a cease and desist notice and thing gets taken down. So I almost hesitate to mention it, but it is so wonderful. The premise of it is that it's Sam Waterston plays this scientist named Quentin Everett Deverell, who leaves America and comes to England. And it's kind of this mix of Sherlock Holmes, proto-steampunk. He's using science to resolve.
What year is this?
When it was made or when it was set?
When it was made.
It was made in 1982.
Okay. And
it was a British production with Sam Waterston and another American actor whose name escapes me. But otherwise, it's set in England and Europe. It is a predominantly English cast, and the antagonist, the main antagonist, he's not the only one, is played by Julian Glover, who is one of these great actors who has been in everything, and yet he just does not have that stature. He has been a Bond villain. He has been an Indiana Jones villain.
I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
He was in Empire
Strikes. Yeah.
He was in The Empire Strikes Back. He has been, and he is still alive. He's we saw him in a play a few years back when we were in London. He's absolutely amazing. And unfortunately, the material doesn't quite, live up to him. It's a little too derivative and fairly pedestrian. But I mean, it's just, Waterston does this great job, and Glover is so good in his role. It's just so wonderful. So I've just been on this kick. I've seen 2/3 of them so far. I'm looking forward to getting to the final third, but it's just such a fun thing to watch. And I've just been, part of it for me is the fact that of the nostalgia of discovering it, but also the fact that, I just, watching Waterston do his thing, watching Julian Glover do his thing, watching all these other actors who may not have been quite as famous, but, this is, British television. So, great performances are the norm rather than the exception. So that's what's been passing through my line of sight. How about yours?
So my first one is Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dines, which I watch when I'm eating. So, and I commented on Facebook. I can't remember what the thread was, but that I watched that, and he's like, I hate watching shows like that because it makes whatever you eat taste like crap. And I'm like, I'm kind of have the opposite. Like I was eating a Spam sandwich, and I guess my imagination fills in the difference.
Have you ever had a chance to visit some of the restaurants in the Valley that they've?
No, I haven't. We've seen a couple on there that we put on our list. One of them though it's in Scottsdale, and we looked at the plate price on Google, and it's like $50 to $100, and I'm like, nope. No, thank you.
There's one place that I've been to, and I'd mention it, except that they haven't paid us for sponsorship, so I'm not going to go ahead and drop the name. I'll tell you about it afterwards. But it is really quite good. So
cool.
I don't feel like you necessarily are led astray by the places that they feature on that show.
Yeah. The other one goes along with the Cary Grant theme, His Girl Friday. So.
That is one of the many Cary Grant films I have not seen.
Oh, really?
So.
Yeah, it's good. I haven't seen it all the way through this run through, and I hadn't seen it since I was a kid. But just the fast, witty dialogue, and it's great to watch old movies like that because they're much more well made than modern stuff, and you can see the craft, and it's. I don't know.
Well, I think that holds true for the two movies that we're going to be talking about today.
For sure, yeah.
That's one of the things that really struck me is that I have certain criticisms, but one thing I cannot possibly fault either movie for is the dialogue. It's so witty. The banter is so entertaining.
Yeah.
It's a common strength of both of them, and I imagine I'm previewing what I'm going to be covering in my share of the crisscross.
Yeah.
So.
For sure. Well, with that, just as always, we'll be diving deep. Fair warning, here there be spoilers. Now our review of Arsenic and Old Lace.
We open on an office in... No, actually, I take that back. We don't. We first get a sort of a slice of New York life. We get the baseball game. You get that Brooklyn Manhattan tension there because it's a baseball game between, I think it's the Giants and the Dodgers. And then we cut to this municipal office where we see Mortimer Brewster, a theater critic, getting a license to marry Elaine Harper.
Yeah. He's wearing sunglasses and doing his best to hide.
And it's because in part he's a celebrity, but it's also because he's a celebrity who is famous for his denunciation of marriage.
Yeah.
They have that great follow-up scene where Elaine's father, the Reverend, is talking to his aunts, and he's tapping the book, and it has some sort of title like The Mistake of Marriage or something like that. He's not just a celebrity. He's a celebrity who's famous because of his his hating on marriage.
Yeah.
And yet we first meet him as he's preparing to get married. And of course it's Cary Grant who he has such a long career and so many people are familiar with him from his later stuff like North by Northwest, Charade. It's so fascinating to see him when he is so young.
Yeah.
And you realize just
Do you know how old he was when he filmed this one?
I want to say he must have been in his 30s.
Yeah.
But he just looks so fresh.
Yeah.
And it's just so amazing. But you already see now the slapstick element gets introduced early on with that. The two reporters. Hey, who's that guy in the glasses, in the sunglasses there, trying to be inconspicuous? It's one of those. You're trying to be inconspicuous, so it makes you conspicuous.
Yeah.
And that's Mortimer Brewster. Hey, what's he doing in getting a marriage license? What's up with that? So you get the premise established that there's this marriage happening, and you see Cary Grant. He's just so delighted, and his Elaine, she is so delighted. They're very clearly in love. The chemistry between them is just absolutely amazing.
And I love the scene in the phone booth when they're hiding from the reporters, and he hangs up the phone on the guys who he's talking to. He's like, "You gotta go, ma'am," and then hangs up the phone, and then he's talking to her like he doesn't want to get married, and he's like, "Yes, Mortimer." He's like, "Stop saying yes, Mortimer," and it's very clear that he's just trying to hide the fact that he actually wants to get married. So.
Yeah, and Priscilla Lane does such a great job of communicating the sense of she's heard this before. She loves him no less for it.
Yeah.
She's willing to patiently deal with it because she knows and she trusts in his love. And it is such a great setup for what happens between them over the course of the movie.
Yeah.
It's such a brief scene, and it really sells the betrayal that she feels later on when Mortimer starts getting
distracted
and carried away. Exactly. Yeah. So, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, one thing that really surprised me about this movie is during the opening titles, I saw directed by Frank Capra, and I'm like, oh, I didn't even realize that. This is not his normal fare. Like the dark comedy is,
and that's one of the things that I think makes this such a. I think a lot of people see it as an outlier because you talk about Capra movies and people rattle off, Mr. Smith, It's a Wonderful Life, State of the Union, and so forth, and they miss this one, and yet it's not because it's one of his quote lesser movies.
You just don't think about it as a Frank Capra movie.
Yeah, exactly. But it also shows the degree to which he can be a successful director, even when he's kind of out of his comfort zone of his style.
Yeah.
So the Mortimer and Elaine do get married. They then go back to their homes in Brooklyn, and this is when we meet their families. We briefly see Elaine's dad because the focus is upon Mortimer's aunts, Abby and Martha, who are played by Josephine Hull and Gina Dare, who were had these long careers coming out of silent films, and now they're a bit older, and they are both. Not only are they delighted by the news, they've been clearly expecting this. And this is, to me, this is an example of the great writing of it because it helps to sell early on the sense that this is not an impulse choice by Mortimer. It's not like I'm going to go and give this marriage thing a try. It's clear that they've been anticipating this, that maybe this has been blooming since they were kids growing up together, perhaps.
And I love how they set up the Brewster sisters. They're set up as these kindly old angels. And this is very important for what's coming. Yes. They're just, and the priest even says, he basically says that like him, a priest, learned absolute kindness and pure generosity from these two sisters.
And it's also underscored in the dialogue before you get to that scene between the two police officers, O'Hara and... remember the other guy's name.
I can't remember.
Begins with a B, Brophy, and how they are, talking about, hey, they're those sisters, they're loaded, and their kindness, and O'Hara notices the room for rent sign, and that's are you kidding? They wouldn't rent it out; they'd give it to them. It's clear that these ladies are represent the best of the human spirit in terms of generosity and caring for one's fellow man, even if they maybe it takes them to certain unorthodox places, shall we say? But we'll get to that in just a moment. So Mortimer is now, he's married, he is getting ready to go on their honeymoon to Niagara Falls, but he decides he in a sense now has to renounce his old life. And I love how it's in the form of he has to destroy his notes for his next anti-marriage book.
Yeah.
and to be fair to him, he kind of realizes it'd be a little hypocritical to continue to ride that train when you've already you've already gotten off of it. So he is searching around for his papers, and he opens up the window box.
The window seat.
The window seat, excuse me. Yeah, the window seat. And he discovers, although we never see it as an audience, that there's a body inside.
Yeah.
And he is just horrified. There's a dead body there. And he immediately assumes that it is left by his cousin, Teddy.
Yeah. Real quick before we get into this, I've got a story to go along with this. When I watched it when I was like 10 years old, or it might have even been younger than that. Anyway, I watched it for the first time and they kept saying the window seat. I thought they were saying the windowsill, and like just behind those curtains there was a body laying there, and just that image like haunted me. Like I had nightmares that night. So.
Yeah. Which is interesting because the way they present this, while there are definitely some scary scenes in it, I don't know if you ever actually see the bodies.
Well, you do see it. You do see it briefly twice, but yeah, they don't show it in the window seat at all.
Yeah,
you don't see their faces.
Yeah. It's interesting the degree to which this is a horror movie, and it's not as though you didn't have horrific images, in films from that period. I mean, we're talking about, this is the era of the classic Universal films, Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, and so forth, and yet this is done in a way to where it really leans into the imagination.
Yeah.
And you get that especially a little bit later when you get the introduction of Jonathan and Dr. Einstein, but we'll get to that. So his assumption is that it's his cousin Teddy who believes that he is Theodore Roosevelt. And this is where you get this great performance by John Alexander. I did a little reading up about him. He basically, this was sort of the go-to performance of his career. This is where it's most famous, but he ends up repeating this in a television version of Arsenic and Old Lace in the 1950s. And I think he repeats it once or twice more. Apparently, he just became sort of Hollywood's go-to Theodore Roosevelt for a period of time when it came, especially when it came to Arsenic and Old Lace. So. Right. And you can see why, because he does such a great job of it. He does such a great job of imitating Theodore Roosevelt, but at the same time, he's not trying to be Theodore Roosevelt. It's to me, it's a very fine line to walk, and I think he doesn't just walk on; he practically dances on it. Yeah, I mean, he's so good at it. But he's telling this to his aunts about how they've got institutionalized, Teddy, because he's degenerated to the point where he's now killing people, and his aunts then sweetly explain to him that Teddy's not the one who killed the unfortunate gentleman. They're the ones who did it. Yeah. And this is when we get their explanation about how it wasn't a horrific act. It was an act of kindness because they were ending the suffering of a lonely old bachelor, just as they had 11 times previously. And Cary Grant,
and they can't decide on whether it's been 11 or 12. Yeah. So
the nice conversation and. Cary Grant, I mean, they must have between takes had to have put eye drops in his eyes because he's always like wide-eyed and as though he's just, it's horror upon horror upon horror. And what makes it not a horror but a comedy is the fact that, one, it's described, and two, it's from these least likely sources, these sweet old ladies who are the very embodiment of kindness. Yeah. And they're poisoners. They're like spiders. They lure people into their web. Yeah. Then they poison them with elderberry wine.
I love the little touches though of like in the dialogue. She's like, and he was a Methodist. Oh, a Methodist. And then like, you won't drag me into one of those scary pictures. And ironically, we are in one of those scary pictures.
Yeah, it's something that, I mean, this is a question I honestly do not know the answer to. Is this the first film that features serial killers?
That could be the case. I don't know.
I mean, I find it difficult to believe that there weren't films in which we have like multiple murders, but the degree to which these women fit the serial killer stereotype, they have a pattern, they have a preferred method of killing, and they keep the bodies.
Yeah, and they've got that cabinet full of hats.
Exactly, they're keeping trophies.
Trophies. Oh my goodness!
It would be interesting to see like the CSI team, or not CSI, the what's that one TV show that stars Joe Mantegna?
I'm not sure.
it was one of those ones that are the Criminal Minds.
Yeah,
the Criminal Minds FBI team, know, showing, because you think about it. I mean, you could easily put them into a Criminal Minds episode, and it wouldn't be this comedy. It would be, you do realize you are killing, these. Yeah, you have a particular type that you target.
You can just picture the explanation or the talking to them at the end, and they're like, "No, we're perfect little angels."
Which I'm sure more than a few of the people they target in the TV show have done as well.
Yeah.
So Mortimer decides he needs to address this, and this basically becomes his, this drives him throughout the movie, and his focus, first of all, is upon saving Teddy, who is not the murderer, but he is an accomplice in that he helps them bury the bodies, and it's just a hilarious joke how everything gets framed in the context of sort of the Roosevelt reputation. He's not digging graves in the basement. He's building locks for the Panama Canal.
Yeah.
And so as funny as it is, I mean, you kind of think about it for a moment. It's like, yeah, he's an accomplice to these murders. And so Mortimer decides he needs to have Teddy institutionalized as a prelude to, I guess, turning his aunts in.
Well, actually, no. Like, he's wanting to pin it on Teddy. That's the whole thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I overlooked that part. I apologize. But while he's gone, his long lost horror of a brother, Jonathan, shows up.
Yeah. And
this, to me, is the one glaring omission of the movie. I so wanted Boris Karloff to play him because it would have so underscored the joke.
Yeah.
Because for anyone who's never seen it before, the joke is that Jonathan has, through the miracle of plastic surgery, been made to look a lot like Boris Karloff. And the joke was, in the original play, the character of Jonathan was played by Boris Karloff.
Yeah.
And they had talked about having him do the movie, which is oftentimes what happens when you do movies, is you have the actors from the play, appear as the characters in the movie. But apparently the play was so successful, and they were so worried that that attendance would fall off if Karloff took a break to do the movie, that they decided that no, they weren't going to do that. I will say, and this is no criticism of Raymond Massey, because he is absolutely amazing in this role.
Yeah, he is.
He's one of these character actors that he just does such a great job in all these movies, and yet he just never had. And it could be his appearance, it could be his demeanor or what have you, but he just does such a great job of conveying menace.
Yeah,
and it helps that his accomplice,
it's Peter Lorre.
Yes, Peter Lorre.
Yeah.
It didn't occur to me until about 2/3 of the way through the movie is the way they emphasize his size by matching him in scenes with Peter Lorre.
Yeah, they're great foils for each other.
They're great. I mean, and Lorre had such a great career playing a foil.
Yeah.
I feel in some ways it actually diminishes him because he's such a great actor on his own.
He's always the lackey role.
Yeah. Maltese Falcon, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. He's always in that role. Although he demonstrates in movies like, of course, the most famously M, that he is great on his own.
Right.
But that size contrast really helps to emphasize Jonathan's presence as that he's this hulking, sinister figure. And he looks like Boris Karloff because Herman Einstein, Peter Lorre's character, is a plastic surgeon. And they have come to the Brewster household because it's time for him to undergo another operation.
Right. I like when they come up that they say that they've got a body in the rumble seat rather than the window seat. And I like that kind of that parallel.
Yeah.
And before we get into further with them, there's just a couple bits that we missed that I want to cover. These are two suspense scenes that I really liked. So when Elaine comes into the house for the first time, after we know the body's in the window seat, she sits on the window seat, and Cary Grant's like, "Oh no, like we get her away from there." And then and they use that body in the window seat for suspense throughout this whole thing.
Oh, and they use it so brilliantly.
Yeah, and then there's a new old man that comes in as. I think Cary Grant's on the phone trying to arrange the transfer to the hospital for Teddy, and the old man is about to get poisoned by these two, and Cary Grant is completely unaware until right at the last moment he goes, "Oh no!" and he throws his wine out of the glass and.
That's a recurring theme of suspense you see in the movie it's kind of like Chekhov's gun is that you have this bottle of poisoned wine and for the moment that you're aware that it's poisoned elderberry wine, the potential that it's going to be drunk recurs throughout the movie. The one that stands out for me is when near the end when Jonathan and Einstein are about to drink it. Which is about to solve a lot of Mortimer's problems.
Yeah, so it's for the good of the audience at that point. But then Teddy comes out and blows the bugle, and of course you've got to have that because you can't have it end so easily.
But of course at the same time that brings about ending of its own. But we'll get to that.
Yeah,
we're not quite up to act 3 yet. So I like how you convey Jonathan's sinisterness very effectively in the effect that it has upon his aunts. They're so sweet and cheerful and friendly to everybody, and that totally vanishes once Jonathan's there. That that these sweet old ladies are terrified of him, and because you can't help but like the ladies. Yeah,
it's the setup for them is so perfect. Like the movie would not work had you not set these two aunts up as like the perfect, like proper angels that just like that whole setup makes this movie work.
And their friendliness to neighbors, their friendliness to strangers, their friendliness to the police officers. It's so natural and instinctive,
right?
That to see it vanish when they're dealing with Jonathan really underscores,
tells you how bad this guy must be.
He's like a black hole absorbing light and hope, and it's done entirely through acting.
And which is a great lead-in of him absorbing all light. There's a pitch black scene where they're taking the body in from the rumble seat, and that's okay. So never mind. They go to I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but he forces his aunts to go to bed, and so all of them are upstairs, and that's when Teddy goes and gets the body from the window seat and takes it into the Panama Canal.
Yeah.
And
takes it out of the basement.
Yeah, down into the basement. And he finishes doing that, and then after that, and this is all played in like pitch black except for a light from under the door from the basement, and then when he opens the door more light comes in, and then there's a little crack of light from the window that you see when they come downstairs, and him and the doctor, Jonathan and the doctor are taking him in from the what was the body's name?
Mr. Spinalzo.
Yeah, Mr. Spinalzo. They take him in through the window.
Yeah.
And anyway, so they get down into the basement and they realize there's already a body in here.
And this gets to the fact that Jonathan sees the Brewster house as not just a temporary way station, but a place where he can stash the body of his latest victim, and maybe even use it down the road, perhaps as a base of operations. And he's not wanted. His aunts want him out, but they're clearly too intimidated to do so. And this is one of the things that I think makes the plot as effective as it is that Jonathan and Einstein figure out what is going on by degrees.
Yeah.
So you start by, first of all, and what's really funny is that the discoveries are all, I think almost all of them are made by Einstein. He's the one who discovers that the canal is that Teddy's digging is a grave, and then later on it's Einstein who discovers that it's not the only grave. And so he's constantly telling Jonathan things about Jonathan's family that he's not aware of because he's so he's been so detached from it. But you have you do have that great scene that I wonder how it would have played out on stage, where it may not have been quite as pitch black. Like if there may have been a bit more of the slapstick going on, but. Their efforts to move the body down, to move Mr. Spinalzo downstairs, are interrupted by Elaine. And
that's right.
Yeah. And Patricia Lane, she again does this great job of selling how terrifying Jonathan is. You know, is that, and at one point he's getting ready to kill her, but then the ants come out, and then of course Mortimer returns, and this is when he, learns that his brothers returned after decades apart.
And also, very importantly, they hide Spinalzo in the window seat.
Yes, I left that part out. I apologize. But this also gives Elaine a chance to get away, although she doesn't so much run off as she leaves in frustration at Mortimer's increasing detachment. Her focus is upon marriage, the honeymoon, and all of a sudden Mortimer is running around, babbling nonsensically, not letting her sit down in a window seat that she's probably sat in dozens of times. Yeah.
And then I like how he ignores her for this whole part when Jonathan has come back, and she's trying to get his attention, like, he tried to kill me, and then at the very end of the scene he's like, "Oh, hi Elaine, when'd you come in?" and then that's when she takes off.
Yeah, which is perfectly understandable from her perspective. All she knows is that she's gone from Mortimer chasing her around a tree, professing his undying love, to Mortimer barely aware of her presence. I mean, that marriage evolved very quickly.
Right.
So, and then you have this. So you have this great confrontation that evolves between Mortimer and Jonathan, and it's effective because Mortimer doesn't realize just how bad of a seed Jonathan is, and so it's great comedy, and Massey plays it straight as an arrow. The scene with the window seat, where Mortimer's not aware that the body's been moved up downstairs, and he assumes that the body that his ants killed is still in there.
Yeah.
And so when you have the ants getting ready to move to the window seat, and both Mortimer and Jonathan are
they both sit on the seat. So I put double suspense for that part.
Yeah. And then you have it slowly dawning on Mortimer that there is. This is after he's figured. This is after he's seen that the body in there is not Spinalzo's, and so he's trying to shield it from his aunt. But I love how he's sitting there next to Jonathan, and then it slowly dawns on him that Jonathan has a secret that he can leverage.
Yeah, and you see it on his. You see it on Cary Grant's face of, "Oh, you've got something in there."
Yeah,
or like he's already looked at the body and seen it's not. No, has he?
Yeah, he has.
Yeah,
he has. After Elaine leaves, he sees that the body in there has, from his perspective, the body's now just changed somehow. It's a different body.
Yeah, and so he blames his aunt, and he's like, "You killed another person," and then she looks in there and she's like, who could that be? Like that kind of thing.
And because Jonathan's not there, he's not aware that they've already discovered who the body is. And I'm trying to remember who he's hiding it from, but then that's when he realizes that
Jonathan.
Yeah.
He's just he doesn't know about the bodies yet, so he's just trying to hide his body.
And he doesn't realize at first that Jonathan. That's Jonathan's body. That's right. He's trying to. That's what it is.
Yeah.
When he and Jonathan run to the window seat, he's trying to hide it from Jonathan, and it only then dawns on him that
as Jonathan's trying to hide it from everyone else, and he looks over at him like, "Oh,
and now
it's your body."
And now he has the leverage to get Jonathan out of there.
Yeah, and I love the line from the aunt where she's like, "It's getting to where anybody thinks they can just come in our house with the body in there."
And there is so much traffic in this house. And this is where it does feel very much like a play.
Yeah,
one set location, people coming in and out, as opposed to say people
moving locations.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, you have the added leverage of Officer O'Hara showing up again, and because he's an aspiring playwright,
we get the suspense has been diffused by everybody now knowing that this is Jonathan's body, and I don't have to hide it from Cary Grant's point of view, and now that that suspense has been diffused, we bring in the policeman, and now there's two. It's double suspense where we've got two bodies that we've got to hide, and they're both trying to leverage it over the other with Cary Grant and Jonathan.
But Grant feels like he can simply, because Spinal's. I don't know if Jonathan quite knows just yet what happened to the body of the man that his aunt's killed.
Yeah,
but but Mortimer uses O'Hara's presence. Oh yes, tell me about your play.
Yeah,
and what you hear is just kind of this inane story. But Grant's perfectly willing to sit through it. And I think you see the inner contempt played out very well later on when he's describing this terrible play that he was watching. But we'll get to that in just a minute.
Yeah.
But he's willing to kind of keep O'Hara around because he knows that he now feels like he could just turn to O'Hara and say, "Oh, by the way, there's a body in the window seat there, and it's Jonathan put it there," and so Jonathan's under real pressure.
Yeah.
And this
is the butt of the suspense in this
yes. Scene. And this is when Einstein comes out of the basement and says, "Oh, there's." This is actually the first time they encounter that they discover that there's another body, I believe. Because
it probably is. I'm mixing it up. Yeah.
Yeah. So. This is for the first time that Jonathan.
You've got it right. So it's the policeman comes in, and Cary Grant has the leverage on him because he knows that the body's in the window seat that Jonathan brought in, and then once they figure out after the policeman leaves that he's got a body down in the basement.
That Jonathan uses the discovery of that body to leverage O'Hara's departure. Because the moment he realizes that
gotcha.
Mortimer has a secret, and that's tied to the ants, then he basically say, "Well, if we're going to share secrets about bodies, I've got one for you as well." Yeah. And all of a sudden, it's like Cary Grant goes from saying, "Tell me more, officer," to "I'll meet you much later. Now just go away," because and it really it underscores Cary Grant's obvious love for his aunts and his not wanting to put them through the horror of, being,
on trial. Going through the whole process.
In prison for all this.
Yeah.
So, and then Jonathan's leverage is compounded by the fact that he discovers this isn't the first time that his aunts have engaged in all sorts of what they deem charitable activities.
Yeah.
and that's where you get that great scene where Einstein it breaks down in laughter, realizing that his aunts have killed as many people as he has.
It's like, you've got 12? They've got 12. And then he gets mad and he's like,
I've got 13.
And then they go through and count through all of them. There's the guy in Phoenix, and then the guy in, I can't remember where the one.
There's the one in London, 2 in Johannesburg, the one in Phoenix, and there's that one in Indiana. Oh, he doesn't
count. Yeah.
Well, he died from pneumonia, which he wouldn't have died from if I hadn't shot him.
No, he doesn't count.
Yeah, it really conveys the degree to which Jonathan's psychopathy is such an integral part of his identity.
Yeah,
it annoys him to no end that his aunts are just as effective in killing a dozen people as he is.
Yeah.
So he decides he needs to up the total by 1. And who's that going to be?
Yeah, and I love the way they do this. He's like, all I need is 1, and I've got a pretty good idea of who that is, and then it cuts to Cary Grant out talking with bringing the doctor. And
yes,
that's the way you do editing. Of it, it helps to. It's like the end of the sentence, basically.
Yeah. But apparently, Jonathan's appearance has underscored something to Cary Grant that you don't quite know when he's approached this conclusion, but when he comes back with Dr. Gilchrist, he goes over to Elaine's house and he tells her that his family's history of insanity means that they can't remain married. And you can appreciate where he's coming from at this point, because he is now determined, okay, his cousin thinks he's Teddy Roosevelt. His aunts are serial killers, and his brother is also a murderer. And so as he puts it, and this is quite possibly my favorite line of the movie, insanity doesn't just run in his family, it gallops. Yeah. So he wants to end the marriage for reasons that Elaine cannot possibly understand, but leaves her heartbroken. And this isn't just another yes, Mortimer, yes, Mortimer, yes, Mortimer. This is Priscilla Lane so sells the pain that she feels from what Mortimer is saying. So, and
this is the beginning of Act 3. The driving force of Act 3 is Jonathan trying to kill Mortimer at this point,
which initially Einstein tries to prevent by telling Mortimer he needs to get away.
Yeah,
you've got a wife now. You got to get you're going to get married because he and this is where I don't know if maybe Einstein's just a little underwritten, but Laurie definitely sells the notion that Einstein's intimidated and bullied by Jonathan, but he just never seems to be able to walk away. So he goes from trying to save Mortimer to aiding and abetting his impending death.
Yeah,
and it's the one part of the part of the story that I had the greatest difficulty really accepting. But the scene where Jonathan and Einstein take down Mortimer is quite possibly my favorite scene in the entire movie.
Yeah, and it's suspense for comedy's sake.
Yes.
He's rattling off this play that he saw that was horrible as he's sitting in the chair, and it's exactly what's happening behind him. And even at one point, well, maybe you remember it better than I do, but just the you get from it the contempt that so many critics feel towards their material. He's talking about this play that it is so horrible it's going to last for it's going to be on stage long after Einstein gets out of prison. And so he's describing the plot about how implausible it is that there is this person who is about to be restrained, and he is just unaware of what's happening around him. And he's describing the steps in this scene while as Jonathan is behind him doing exactly the same thing.
No, not just that. He's inspired by it.
Yeah. There's a certain point where he's like, he tied him up with the curtain cords, and he cuts
Jonathan's
off,
like,
he's
what
like,
a great idea.
And he cuts off the curtain cords. Yeah.
And he's just sitting there ready to be bound and gagged. How ridiculous is that? And
as he's gesturing, pointing to Jonathan not realizing it.
That Jonathan's like all 2 inches behind him. Oh yeah, it's so masterfully done, and it gets to one of the things that fascinates me about this movie, which is it feels as though there are 3 movies happening at the same time.
Right.
You have Mortimer and Elaine's romance. Mm-hmm. You have almost the film noir of Jonathan and Einstein, and you really see that play out in the scenes that are just the two of them.
Yeah.
And then you have the slapstick comedy, which is centered around Cary Grant.
Right.
And it is fascinating how seamlessly they blend together.
Yeah.
And I think if this is I think a function of the writing, but also the directing. Because in so many films you have that with just like 2 elements, and it's jarring, it's disconcerting. It's like you're doing A, you're enjoying A, and all of a sudden B comes out of nowhere and just kind of throws you off. And here it's so seamless, and you see it in the scene where you have the noirish menace of Jonathan in the background, who never cracks a smile.
Yeah. And
then you have Peter Lorre who's straddling the two, and which I think is part of Peter Lorre's genius as an actor. And then you have and then you have Cary Grant just full
eating
on
up the scenery,
scenery with this description, and it blends together so beautifully.
Yeah. And this is also an example of suspense for comedy, which it's great. Like that people always think of suspense as a horror thing, which it can be used very well with, but it's really a high emotional thing, and you can use that emotion to play it for comedy. Just the tension of, no, he's right behind you doing the things, and it's.
Do you think that it is harder to do suspense for comedy or suspense
Well,
for...
I'll get to that more in depth when we get to the crisscross, but yeah, I think it's harder to do it for comedy because, spoiler, I'm going to give a bit away of what I think of Trouble with Harry, but I think this movie does it better. So.
Oh my gosh, let's do better. But again, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
So Jonathan is now planning on killing Mortimer and not doing it slowly. He talks about how he's going to string this out for hours. But then they're interrupted by the return of Officer O'Hara, who's disappointed that Mortimer never went to the bar to hear him continue to describe his plot. And
he realizes he has a captive audience.
Yes, he realizes it's where you get to the impression that Officer O'Hara is not exactly New York's finest.
Yeah,
and in that he sees Mortimer bound and gagged, and his. Not only is it not his first thought, not only is it not his first thought, the thought never occurs to him that Mortimer is in danger. It's instead, as you said, captive audience.
Yeah,
and you get this nice bit of slapstick where you have the integration of O'Hara's description of his awful sounding play, with what's going on in the background.
Yeah, again, suspense. This is how you do the easiest way to do suspense, or I guess simplest way, is to have something going on in the background that the character in the foreground is not aware of. The easiest example of this is The Birds, where she's just like smoking, waiting for the school to get out, and you see the birds gathering in the background. Anyway. But
and it works here because for it to succeed, especially since you can't trip over O'Hara's dialogue, is that it has to be done entirely through physicality. And again, this is where Raymond Massey, he is so good at doing this looming, menacing presence.
Yeah.
And you see the knife in his hand in a close-up, but when you do the long shots, you can't. It's just Raymond Massey's, scarred face, his expression, the way he's, coming down the steps to kill O'Hara, who's totally oblivious because his back is to the stairs. He's focused upon selling his plot to Mortimer. And this is when Einstein has enough.
Yeah.
Takes off his shoe, whacks Jonathan upside the head, knocking him out. And this is when we hear a knock on the door, and O'Hara is so immersed in recounting his plot that, one, he says, ignore it. But then as he is recounting the plot, he says, come in. And this is when Brophy and another police officer show up. And again, they're not exactly, the crack squad of the New York Police Department. They see Jonathan there, and they're like, "Oh, he kind of looks like Boris Karloff. He's Mortimer's brother." Mm-hmm. They're totally oblivious to who Jonathan is. But when Brophy calls into the station, because they're there because Teddy's blown his trumpet, his bugle once too often, and the neighbors are calling in, and the police have had enough.
Yeah.
Clearly the ants cannot restrain poor crazy Teddy, who is a menace to the neighborhood because of his bugle. Never mind the over a dozen bodies that are in the house.
Yeah.
That's the great threat. But of course, as Jonathan's coming to, he hears this one-sided conversation, and it sounds as though the police have finally caught up with him.
Yeah, as he's waking up,
yeah.
he hears this. Yeah.
And so he decides, okay, you got me, coppers, but have I got a story for you? There are over a dozen bodies in the basement.
Yeah.
And the police are unbelieving, but they're going to go downstairs. Mortimer's trying to disrupt this. There's a bit of a kerfuffle, but it's when O'Hara casually mentions what for Jonathan must be the umpteenth time how much he looks like Boris Karloff. It sets Jonathan off.
Yeah.
And then you get that wonderful brawl.
Where Cary Grant is just done with it at
Yeah,
this point. He's
I'm
on
done.
the stairs and he's just like, go on, fight.
And so the focus is, so you have this brawl, and it's a knockdown, drag out fight.
And you don't even see it. It's just shadows on the wall as you see Cary Grant on the stairs.
Or actors passing in and out of scene as the camera stays resolutely on Cary Grant as he goes, and he sits on the steps and decides, I'm done. I've got the papers. But basically, it takes all three of these police officers to finally, knock Jonathan out.
And before he knocks Jonathan out, Cary Grant needs the phone, and he's like, I can't reach the phone. And then Jonathan comes in, and he's like, I'm going to hit every one of you coppers with this phone or whatever. And he lifts it up, and he's like, oh, thank you. And he grabs the receiver, and he dials as it's in his hand.
And Jonathan is so distracted that it gives, I think it's O'Hara, the opportunity to finally, conk him on the head with this nightstick and take him out. And this is when a lieutenant arrives, and he berates all three of these police officers. Yeah, we've been looking for this guy. He escaped from the asylum for the criminally insane months ago, and guys just don't read your circulars. And so Jonathan, exits stage right.
Oh, well, okay. Before that, though, Jonathan exposes the 13 bodies in the... He says there's 13 bodies in the basement to the policeman.
It's in the lead up to the fight where you have Mortimer...
Because Mortimer's still gagged in the chair, and he's like, oh, no, and he stands up with the chair.
And it's such good physical comedy from Cary Grant. It's something that he doesn't... I mean, he's known for his romantic... His romantic presence in films. He's known for he's so great at dialogue.
Yeah, his comedic chops though are just insane.
Yeah. But you don't appreciate the degree to which, I mean, his skills at physical comedy are almost Marx Brothers level.
And he breaks the fourth wall twice in this.
Yes, I noticed that.
Right. I think the first time is when he sees the body in the window seat, and then he looks dead center in camera for a second, and then looks off. And then the second time is after he's done the whole suspense thing of they're right behind me, and they're right behind him, and the dumb doof sits down in the chair, and this whole thing. And right at the end of it, when they're tying him up and gag him, he stares into the camera again.
Like, boy, am I an idiot.
Yeah.
So, and it's done to where it helps that he times it just long enough to where you pick up on the fact that he's doing it.
Yeah.
But he doesn't just stare at the screen for like 10 seconds
and
really just kind of ruin it. So it's so well done. So Witherspoon arrives to take Teddy away, and they go through the process of getting him to agree to be taken away. Abby and Martha, the aunts, they come downstairs. They learn that Teddy is being taken away because of the bugle playing, and they're so distraught that they ask to accompany him.
Yeah.
And this solves, Cary Grant's other problem, which is what to do about his aunts. And so he'd much rather have them institutionalized than imprisoned. So he is, so he's perfectly willing to sign off on this. But there is a complication because his signature may not be valid because it turns out he's not a Brewster. And if he's not a Brewster, guess what?
He's not crazy.
He's not crazy. Yeah. Yahoo!
Well, okay, so the final push with the dramatic tension, though, is about the 13 bodies of... Jonathan has revealed that there's 13 bodies in the basement, and Mortimer is trying to draw their attention away from it, and he's like, and there's 1,000 bodies in the attic, and they're like, no, we do have 13 bodies in the basement. We've got flowers on their graves. And then he's like, I've got tinsel up in the...
It helps that that ultimately his aunts and his cousin prove more convincing, because first you have the aunts saying it, and their delivery is just so unassuming. It only confirms to the police that maybe they are crazy and need to be institutionalized.
Yeah.
And then you have Teddy coming down, and he says, "Why, yes, there are 13. There's bodies in the basement. Okay, who are you? I'm Teddy Roosevelt."
Yeah. And then the police are like, do we have room for the ladies? And the guy from Happy Dale is like, just the ladies, staring at Cary Grant. And he's like, what? Okay.
Yeah. But Cary Grant's problems are now all solved, and he can go he can reconcile with Elaine, and they can have their wonderful honeymoon in Niagara Falls. And that's the end of the movie.
Yeah, I wanted to jump back and just cover one more joke. As he sees Teddy for the first time, and he runs up the stairs, and he's like, charge! He's like, oh dear, and there are so many staircases at Happy Dale. Anyways, yeah. So that was our review of Arsenic and Old Lace. So now for our review of The Trouble with Harry.
This opens... the first thing that stands out for me is the contrast in the shooting, and maybe this is better saved for the crisscross. But whereas you have the staginess of Arsenic and Old Lace, you open in this bucolic landscape of Vermont.
Lots and lots of wide shots of autumn trees and
yes, I mean it's just so gorgeous. I honestly cannot think of a Hitchcock film that is more and admittedly I've not seen all of them, that is more beautiful than this one,
for sure.
And to me, it's one of the things that just makes it, such a memorable film, because it's just so gorgeous. And we have these wide shots, these panning, showing this New England in the fall, all the trees with the leaves are turning. We see this young boy, Arnie Rogers, played by Jerry Mathers. And I had to say, when I discovered that, I was like, wow. It's because, I mean, for generations, he's famed for being the Beaver from Leave It to Beaver. And to see him.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And
to see him in a role before that.
Yeah.
Is just amazing.
And he does great with it, too.
Oh, he does. I mean, the child actors can be so hit or miss, and you can see why. I could see how a television producer would have been watching that and saying, you know what,
like, that's our kid.
Yeah, we could trust him to do a series.
Yeah.
So.
And another casting thing that surprised me was introducing Shirley MacLaine. So this was her first movie.
Yes, apparently I read that she was a chorus girl on Broadway, and
really?
And she was doing well in it, but it was not exactly a great she wasn't exactly making a ton of money doing it. And it was Hitchcock or one of the other producers who saw her and was like, we need to get her in front of a camera. But that was apparently one of the intentions behind this movie, was that Hitchcock was motivated to make a movie without stars.
Okay,
He wanted to see, and what's funny is that you look at the people that are in it. You do have what at that point was already an Oscar winner in Edmund Gwynn. You have a future Oscar winner in Shirley MacLaine.
Mm-hmm.
You have John Forsythe, who goes on to have this really amazing career on television, and yet in 1955, when this film comes out, Gwynn is seen more as a character actor. He's not a box office draw the way that, say, Cary Grant is.
Mm-hmm.
And Shirley MacLaine's an unknown, and Jerry Mathers is an unknown. So this really is a film without real notable,
stars.
Stars in
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Great actors.
Yeah.
Not stars. That's a good distinction. But we go from seeing the Vermont countryside to zeroing in on young Arnie Rogers tramping through it, and then he hears 3 shots, followed by a man's voice saying, "Okay, I know how to handle your type." Do they ever return to that for the rest of the movie? They referenced 3 shots again. That becomes important to the story. But the man saying
that. Yeah.
I don't either. And the thing is that, and to me, I wonder if that's a plot hole, because they never really addressed to whom he is speaking.
So it's Harry speaking, is what you're saying?
Presumably.
Okay.
It may be I missed it when maybe it came out during. It was part of his encounter with Ivy Gravely, or
yeah, that's what I was thinking. Maybe.
Yeah, it is the only thing I can think of. But I don't know if I don't think she mentions it, and it certainly seems a little like out of place given.
That is strange
what they describe. But it serves a purpose in the story, in the sense that it implies that there is some sort of struggle taking place. Mm-hmm. So, but Arnie's continues walking through the woods, and then he comes across the body of a man dressed in a suit, and he stands over it, and then he runs off. Nearby is Captain Albert Wiles, played by the great Edmund Gwynn. Mm-hmm. He's a retired ship's captain. He is out hunting rabbits. Get the impression he's a little lonely because he talks to himself a lot.
Yeah.
You also get the impression that he is not the greatest hunter that has ever, hefted a rifle.
Yeah.
And as he is walking back home, he stumbles across the body. And he assumes that this man is dead because he shot him. That Albert shot.
Yeah. And if he's like, if you're going to get shot, do it where you're known.
And so he fishes through the man's pockets and finds out that his name is Harry Warp. Mm-hmm. He decides that he is going to cover up his crime. But his efforts to dispose of the body keep getting interrupted by this parade of people who keep showing up, observing the body, and then walking off and not doing a thing about it.
Yeah. And I think it's great. They do a thing here that's called lamp shading, where it's like, it's pretty amazing that this one remote spot in the woods, all these people keep coming by. And so he makes this comment of, couldn't have more people if I sold tickets. And so it's, lamp shading in writing is basically where you mention the thing that's an issue, and then it becomes a feature rather than a bug. So. He
makes another reference about putting later on about putting it on television. So he brings up a couple times.
Yeah.
And but first you have Ivy Gravely.
Yeah.
Played by Mildred Natwick,
who actively has a conversation with him as he's dealing with this body.
And initially you think it's because she's just so fixated on introducing herself to Albert and getting, establishing a relationship with him. Mm-hmm. You don't realize till later that she has a bit of an ulterior motive herself,
right.
Related to Harry. And then after Ivy goes away, then you have Arnie returning with his mother, Jennifer, played by played by Shirley MacLaine, who is so impossibly young looking here.
Yeah.
I had to look up her age when she played this. She was 21.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but which of course the math doesn't work on that. So she's playing someone older because Arnie, her son, he's got to be what, 5, 6?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So, it's not implausible, but at the same time, it's like at 21. So, but she stands over the body, and you get the what you learn from her conversation with her son is that 1, she knows who Harry is. 2, she is not sad that he's dead.
Yeah.
And so she's like, well, why don't we?
Which plays a bit for comedy. It's like, wait, what? Like, anyway. And then we get a wandering bookworm who's
Dr. Greenbow, played by
Dr. Greenbow.
Yeah. Dwight Marfield's performance to me is just it's so dissonant. He is not a good actor.
Oh yeah.
His line delivery is so wooden, and I don't think that was a character affectation. It's like they I guess they hired him because
I think it kind of works though, because it's like, I don't know.
It does until the end. It's the climatic scene in Jennifer's house where the woodenness just becomes too great for me to really kind of
breaks the suspension cable.
Yeah. And then of course, and it's also that his character is so over the top that his face is buried so deeply in his book, which is not exactly a gigantic book, that he trips over the body, I think, twice, and
doesn't see it.
Not once does he look down. It was just a little bit much for me. But then even after he goes away, then a tramp shows up.
Steals his shoes.
Steals the shoes, which ends up becoming a pretty good plot point. So only after that, so only after that is Albert alone with the body. But then we cut to
our main character.
Sam Marlowe. And I can't help but wonder if that name had a particular purpose to combine the names of two of the major detective figures in the cinema.
Okay, yeah. So
Sam Spade, Philip Marlowe.
Yeah,
Sam Marlowe.
Gotcha.
Maybe just a coincidence. I don't know.
He doesn't do much detectiving, but
that is true, which is why maybe I'm reading a bit into it there.
I saw this movie was listed as a mystery, and I'm like, this is not really a mystery. But
well, there is a mystery in the sense, although they're not like actively trying to solve it.
Who killed him?
Yeah,
basically, because they. Well, I mean, none of them know for sure which one of them killed it.
Yeah, no, there is that line where Albert and Sam are talking about it when they realize that Albert didn't shoot him, and Albert goes, we've got a whodunit. And Sam corrects him and says, "No, we have. It's a who has done this,
or who did this,
or who did this,
who did
it." And then Albert says, "This is what I said. Who done it?
Who done it?" Yeah,
I thought you'd like that line.
Yeah, that's good.
But this is where we get introduced to our singing painter, Sam Marlowe.
Which that is not him singing, by the way. He's got this deep baritone voice as he's singing, and then when he starts talking, he's kind of got higher range.
Yeah. It's a voice with which millions of Americans are familiar because he ends up, doing the voice of Charlie in Charlie's Angels, and I think his last role was
the guy that sang, or
yeah, no, not the guy.
John the actual
actor.
actor. Oh, okay, cool.
But he's sauntering into town to drop off his latest painting at Mrs. Wiggs's roadside stand, and you learn from this that he is not a successful painter. That Mrs. Wiggs, played by Mildred Dunnock, has all these paintings of his just sitting there, as though maybe some wandering, I don't know, millionaire
next to her jam and stuff.
Next to her jam and her cider. And this idea that somehow some sort of wandering rich person is going to just show up and magically buy all the paintings. What are the odds? So,
and I love structurally wise, like they set up the situation before they set up the main character, which usually they reverse that of of it. You set up your main character, and then you set up your situation, and then you get into Act 2.
You end up learning a lot about the character from the situation being set up.
Yeah.
Like when you see him and Miss Wiggs going into her general store, and Ivy Gravely is there, and she's there because she's preparing for to have Albert over for coffee and blueberry muffins and maybe a little bit of elderberry wine.
Oh, no. Don't drink the wine.
I think I found the crisscross. Yeah. It's the omnipresence of elderberry wine in murder mysteries. So, so then he goes into the hills to sketch, and now he comes across Harry's body, which is still lying out there, albeit now shoeless, and he sketches Harry's face. Albert has missed the opportunity to hide the body because he's been waiting for so long for the crowds to clear that he's fallen asleep. So he wakes up from his nap. He confesses to Sam that that he's the reason why Harry's dead, and he recounts the events that lead up to the shooting. Now, this is where you get the notion of how quirky these characters are. I mean, it's already been implied, but Sam's rather kind of glib about the whole thing. Yeah, he's sympathetic towards Albert's plight, and he agrees. Albert tells him that Jennifer, whom Sam has yet to meet, has not obviously knows him, and they got to figure out what her relationship is with him and what her attitude is before they can decide how to dispose of the body. Yeah. So he goes to Jennifer's house. He clearly knows Arnie, but he does not. But he's meeting Jennifer for the first time, and you get some lines that I suppose they're supposed to be romantic, but there's a bit of lechery going on, especially that one line. I'd like to paint you nude. Yeah. Which for the 1950s was very risque. Right. And well, they play it off as he's an artistic type. Yes. But yeah. There's a couple things that we missed in the setup for his character. So, first of all, we're introduced to the antagonist that will show up later, the sheriff's deputy. Calvin Wiggs. Yeah, Calvin Wiggs. And then the rich man comes to look at his paintings, and this is after they've left the booth and they're inside talking in the shop. And so this is suspense of like, no, go out there. He's wanting to buy your paintings right now. And I think they just barely miss him. No, they don't miss him, because what happens is when Sam is getting Ivy ready for her coffee with Albert, he has Mrs. Wiggs cut her hair, and he goes out to the stand, and so the millionaire is there with the paintings, right? And he's totally, and he's even trying to talk to Sam, and Sam's like, "Hold on here, I'm on something more important than selling my paintings. Yeah. I need to find a ribbon for Ivy's hair, so that she can woo Albert." And then of course you get that line when Albert mentions these, because he doesn't know that the line that the coffee's with Albert, but he puts it together when Albert's talking about how he's going to have coffee with Ivy, and realize, oh, so you're the one. And there's that line that is both amusing and also just to me a little kind of a little insensitive about how she's a well-preserved woman. Yeah. And eventually you have to open up the jar of preserves. Yeah. Which I guess, it's supposed to be complimentary about, the fact that she's attractive for her age. Although they kind of nag her by saying, how old do you think I look? Well, I think you look 50. I'm 42. So yeah. Our main character, Marlowe, is introduced to Jennifer, yeah. And we learn that she is Harry's estranged wife, and we hear about this rather unorthodox relationship where Harry is her husband, but he's not Arnie's dad. He's Arnie's uncle. that Jennifer is married to Harry's brother, and he died tragically soon after their marriage, and only afterward did she find out she was pregnant. And Harry felt obligated to marry her, but there was some sort of weird dynamic going on. I read it as an implication that Harry's gay.
Oh, I did not pick up on that.
Because you get the story about how she marries Harry. They're at their wedding night.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And she says, "I didn't love him, but I kind of worked myself up. I was there with my negligee, and Harry apparently demonstrated zero interest."
Yeah.
So even though they're married, they've been, there's whether it's that, whether it's something else.
Yeah, whether it's that or what she just says of he wasn't in love with her.
Yeah.
It plays either way.
Yeah. The point is that that's one of the reasons why she's totally indifferent to him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Being dead. But you also find out that they had a final encounter and she hit him on the head with the milk bottle. So maybe that's why Harry's dead. We don't know for certain. So then we cut to Albert and Ivy having coffee and blueberry muffins. And it's a little awkward, but their mutual interest in one another allows them to power through that. Arnie shows up with a dead rabbit that he found, and which becomes an important interest to Bowman. And again, this is where you see Jerry Mathers as a child actor doing so well, which is when they're trying to ask him about where he got the rabbit from, and he's fixated on this plate of delicious-looking blueberry muffins. He says, "I found it in the blueberry muffins."
And then she's like, "Oh, you want one?" And
this is
a blueberry muffin rabbit.
I love that line. This is a 2 blueberry muffin rabbit.
Yeah. I don't know how child actors, like, I don't know. He plays it so naturally, like it's not written, is what I'm saying.
I think that's really the key to success of child actors is getting them to be unaffected. It's kind of like the challenge you have with dogs, which is that you can get dogs to perform, but you have to do something about their tails because what they're doing, they realize they're being good.
They have to CG their tails out.
Exactly. So that's what's happening here. Is that he is just such a natural. You totally buy the fact that he does those line deliveries so well. But now. Albert and Sam meet up again, and Sam's gotten the all clear to bury Harry. But they bury Harry. They cover up the body,
which I think this is the beginning of Act 2 as they bury Harry for the first time.
Yes, they buried Harry for the first time, and then Albert realizes that the rabbit is dead because he shot it, and so he couldn't have shot Harry. Yeah, there's the bullet in the can. There's the bullet in the sign. He thought his third bullet had hit the 3 he had fired was the one that had killed Harry. But if he killed the rabbit, the first rabbit apparently he's ever killed.
Yeah.
Then he could have been he killed Harry. But to confirm that, you got to dig up the body.
Yeah, and in this time, the doctor walks up again and trips over the body again. And then he gets up and he sees Harry this time. And there's a moment there where it's like, "Oh no!" And that's the suspense. But he's like, "Oh, I beg your pardon," and then he keeps walking.
He is the most absent-minded of the absent-minded. Yes. So they exhume his body, Harry's body. They confirm that he wasn't shot. Albert then invites Ivy to his house. And his cozy little shack, and it's there that Ivy confesses that she's had an encounter with Harry before she came across Albert with Harry's body.
Yeah, and
that she believes she's the one who's killed him because she hit him with her shoe.
Yeah,
that they had some sort of encounter where he came out of the bushes or something like that, and this means that they now have to go and dig up Harry's body once again.
Yeah.
So they exhume the body a second time. And then they go to Jennifer's house where Sam is. And that's where you get this where Jennifer and Sam are talking, and you get the impression that they're kind of, engaging this little, dance of romance and kind of getting closer together. And then Albert and Ivy show up, and it's like, well, and both of them have a confession to make. Ivy confesses she's the one who killed Harry, and Albert confesses they've exhumed the body yet again.
Yeah, and she's the one that exhumed the body.
Yeah.
She's got the dirt on her face and the shovel.
That's one of the things you see is that Albert goes to great lengths to try to avoid participating in the exhumations. First one, it's Sam who's doing most of the digging, and then in the second one, it's Ivy who's doing most of the digging. So she plans on turning herself in, but now there's this complication, which is Jennifer's status. And so they decide that for Jennifer's sake, because they don't want a lot of this stuff to hurt her reputation, they're going to go ahead and rebury Harry.
Yeah.
So they all go and do that.
They all have a funeral.
They all have a funeral. As Albert puts it, it's my third one today.
and we set up the creaky closet door that keeps opening on its own in this scene.
Yeah, I mean,
I didn't know what the deal was with that one, but it's going to come up later.
So after they've reburied Harry, they're walking back to town, and they're met by an excited Mrs. Wiggs because a millionaire has shown up to buy his paintings.
Yeah.
And you get this wonderful bit of dialogue where the millionaire clearly values the art, and he's willing to spend a lot of money to get it. And this is where I think you really see Sam's character in his best light, because he wants to share the wealth with his friends. And so he asks for, very modest things, and he then encourages his friends to ask for things. So Mrs. Wiggs gets a cash register.
Jennifer gets strawberries delivered to her.
Yeah, 2 boxes of strawberries. And so it's like everything is...
Arnie gets a chemical set of the stinkiest chemicals.
That's available.
Yeah.
And so when the millionaire leaves, he's going to come back with these things. Everyone's happy. Sam proposes to Jennifer. She's being a little coy about it. It seems like the worst is behind them.
And I like when... This is just a blink and you'll miss it line, but he's like... somebody says to Marlowe, come on, be reasonable, ask for something. And he's like, oh, be unreasonable if you want. The millionaire. Anyway. The
dialogue in this film is so good.
Yeah, it's really clever.
It's not quite as sharp as...
No. There's not as many flat out laughs, but there's humorous stuff.
Yeah. To me, it's not so much funny as it is witty. It's a very witty script in that respect. But then we have Mr. Wet Blanket himself, Calvin, showing up. Now, Calvin's played by Royal...
This is the introduction... This is going into Act 3, Calvin Wiggs. So.
Calvin's played by Royal Dano, and I didn't know this about him. He ends up being the sort of the model and the voice for Walt Disney's Abraham Lincoln.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Manitronic, the voice that when he was doing Disneyland in the late 50s and early 60s. So he ends up having a fairly successful career out of that. And this is where I think he's does a better job than the guy who plays Dr. Greenbow. He's actually really good at it because he really does have that wet blanketness. But it's not that he's a bad person by any stretch.
Yeah,
he just does humorlessness. You get that from the fact that even his mother seems to be kind of like Calvin,
which is the shopkeeper.
Yeah,
Twiggy. So
yeah, Wiggy.
Wiggy. Yeah, right.
And he tells them that he picked up the tramp who was wearing Harry's shoes, and that the tramp tells this fantastic story about a body, and he leads Calvin up to the hill. They didn't find a body. But Calvin's phoning it into the state police. And so...
Just then he sees...
Well, not just then, because first Sam, Jennifer, Albert, and Ivy leave.
Right.
But Sam has left his sketchbook behind.
Yeah.
And that is when Calvin sees the sketch of Harry. Now, he hasn't seen Harry, but he says it fits the tramp's description perfectly.
Right.
So now he's getting suspicious. The quartet return to Jennifer's house, and Jennifer accepts Sam's proposal. But before she can marry Sam, they have to prove that her husband is dead.
Yeah, and I like the he at the end of the scene where he asks the millionaire for stuff. Mm-hmm. They're like, "You got to ask for something," and then he whispers something into his ear, and you don't know what it is. And then, right after she says yes to his proposal, he's like, or she's like, "What did you ask the millionaire for?" And then he whispers into her ear, and she's like, "Yes, that seems very practical." Yes. And we don't hear what he said.
Yeah, you learn what it is at the end, but it's a nice little mystery. I mean, arguably it's the most mysterious thing in the movie.
That's true. Yeah.
So, because it's interesting, it's not the mystery about Harry; it's the trouble with Harry.
Yeah.
So they have to now exhume the body a third time.
Yeah.
Because now they have to find a way of confirming his death. And so they exhume him. They, Dr. Greenbow, wanders up yet again. They hide from him. He now finally finally realizes that he's stumbling over a body. Then they just appear out of nowhere, and Greenbow doesn't even think twice about it.
Yeah.
But they get him to agree to confirm the cause of death.
Right.
And they decide they're going to take the body back to Jennifer's house, which you don't see. But we open on them in Jennifer's house. They're cleaning his clothes while waiting for Greenbow to arrive, because apparently they're going to stage the body.
Yeah.
But it isn't Greenbow who shows up first. It's Calvin.
Right.
And he's got the sketch, and he starts interrogating Sam about the sketch, and Sam proceeds to explain away the sketch, and in doing so, he destroys it. And what bothers me about this is the fact that Calvin is dopey enough to let him do that.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, he's like, I think he plays it well. Like he's looking at it as he's doing it, and almost like in not understanding, but also kind of shock at what he's doing.
It's also in a sense that Sam kind of, lulls him with his patter.
Yeah.
He's like, well, we artists, we do this and this and this while he's doing it. And afterwards, it's kind of like Calvin snaps out of the trance and goes, hey.
And he's not exactly Sherlock Holmes either. He's just local sheriff's deputy.
But you get the impression he does take his job very seriously. And while that is a detriment for the characters, it's the doggedness that makes him such a threat to them.
And there's one moment of suspense that I want to cover before we get too far past it, is right when we see them like cleaning Harry's clothes and like Harry's feet like on the couch or something. We see the shadow of the feet on the wall, and then Calvin walks in. We just see Calvin and him looking, and we're like, oh no. And it holds for a second, and then we cut to they're playing a card game.
Oh, and so they then hurriedly stashed the body in the bathroom.
They stashed him in the tub.
Because you had that one
moment.
But
we think he's in the closet for a long time.
See, I missed that. Because I remember Arnie comes in and he's talking about the bathtub, and from everyone's kind of like, oh my gosh. And then,
that's a little bit later.
And then they pass it off as they convince Calvin that Arnie's actually talking about the frog.
I think that's why they had the closet door keep opening, and then as he asks him about the drawing, Marlowe is standing in front of the closet door, like leaning up against it.
To quote from Monsters University, misdirection.
Yes. Which isn't a big thing that Hitchcock does a lot, but I mean, because he's not a mystery director, or he doesn't play in that kind of realm, but he pays it off with suspense when the door opens right as Calvin leaves, and you're like, oh no, and because you think he's in the door, so you've got that suspense in your mind of he's in the closet, and the thing falls out of the closet and hits on the floor, and he looks, and right behind him this is what I'm talking about with the character in the foreground and something in the background. You see his feet in the tub in the doorway, and
which Calvin never actually gets a chance to see, fortunately.
Yeah.
I can't help but wonder if the stunt with the closet door would have worked better is if the first 2 or 3 times, because I think it's 2 times previously in the movie you see it opening up.
Yeah, you see it open.
If it had been something that had just was happening in the background, rather than, I'm thinking in particular about the second scene, the second time it opens, where it opens up and Albert stares at it as though it's like the Telltale Heart or something.
Yeah.
And it's and yet there's no real explanation about why the audience should care about it. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking if it had just been more of a casual thing where it kept opening and having like Jennifer kind of, slamming it shut or opening again, slamming it shut.
Right. Rather than making a thing out of it.
Whereas having it open up all the way in that moment slowly, with the implication being the body was there, may have been a more effective moment. But yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit. But but they're able to. Sam destroys the sketch, and Calvin is getting upset, but then he's distracted by his car horn being honked outside by Albert, who in effect throws Calvin off. He gets in the car, drives off, and he misses the fact that Albert had retrieved Harry's shoes. So now Calvin has zero evidence, though the state police are going to show up tomorrow.
Yeah, I want to jump back just to the door moment, or not the door moment. Forget about the door. The tub moment real quick. So the door opens and Arnie is like, "What's he doing in our bathtub?" And he's like, and then there's that moment of suspense of, "Oh no!" And then he's like, "That's where frogs belong." And he's like, "Oh," and then the coast is clear for that moment. The doctor comes in while he's still there, and he's like, "Where is he?" So it's like, oh no, he's going to find out because the doctor's here to examine the body. And Jennifer's like, he's in the bathroom playing with his frog. And then there's this look from him of like, what? The dead body is playing with the frog?
So Greenbow goes and examines the body, and he determines that Harry didn't die from a gunshot. He didn't die from being whacked on the head with a jar. He didn't die from being whacked on the head with a shoe. He died from a heart attack.
Yeah.
Which means that everybody is off the hook.
Right.
And so Jennifer then recounts the entire story. The
entire movie to
Greenbow.
The doctor. Yeah.
And again, this is where that acting just, it's, he's supposed to be selling this notion of mounting bewilderment or horror or something, and it's just so flat. It sounds like, oh, what? Oh, I better get out of here. Exit stage right.
Yeah.
But he in effect, he's assuaged their collective guilt. But now they have the problem. Now they talk about wistfully how, gosh, if only Arnie had just discovered him. Maybe he could discover him again.
Yeah, so they put him there, and then Arnie comes up, and he just stands there. And then the mom is like, go home and so you can tell me about it. And then the other two say other things, and then he's like, beat it, you little creep.
It's like the central characters become audience surrogates.
Yeah.
They're like, come on, Arnie, move
they're saying the suspense things.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they successfully restage it. Arnie runs off, and quite possibly we get my favorite ending card of any movie ever. The trouble with Harry is over.
Well, this is right before this, though.
No. The trouble with Harry is over. I'm Steve.
Okay. So right before this, he reveals what the secret was to, and we think we're not going to get it because he reveals it to the captain, and he just whispers it, and we're like, oh crap. And then Miss Graves or Miss Gravely asks what it was, and he's like, what did you ask for? He's like, a double bed. And then and music, trouble with Harry's over.
Yeah. I just love the double meaning of that title card. It's just so it's just so nicely done.
That is good.
And that's the trouble with Harry.
Every once in a while, two films will share a bond to transcend time, space, and even genre. These similarities go down to their DNA. So let's dissect and deconstruct, compare and contrast. It's time to go crisscross.
Crisscross.
Well, there's certain elements that stand out for me that the two films have in common, but I mean, I'll be honest, it's the contrast that stands out more.
Right.
I mean, building upon what you're saying, the both films, there is a lot of similarity between them, and yet when I reflect upon them side by side, it's the difference between Arsenic and Old Lace, which to me is such an amazing film, and The Trouble with Harry, and I'm anticipating a review, is such a disappointing film.
Yeah, for sure. Well, to set a baseline for it, they both revolve around a dead body. And so...
It is the notion of the corpse as the MacGuffin.
Yeah,
and it's a commonality between the two. And it's fascinating about how in so many ways it's similar. It's about it's not just about the corpse. It's about the effort to hide, disguise, obfuscate. It motivates very similar concerns in both movies, and neither of them is about.
But they play them very differently.
Yes,
yeah.
Neither of them is it a mystery. In both of them, it's just suspense.
Yeah, I mean, because it's not played for because we know. In Trouble with Harry, we don't know for sure who killed them, but we keep thinking we found out who killed them, but it's not about the mystery. In Arsenic and Old Lace, it's clearly set up who killed them from the beginning. So
everyone confesses.
Mystery's off the table.
Yes.
So,
and that's actually one of the things that I think, but yet for some reason, because there was a mystery in The Trouble with Harry, I kept expecting there to be more suspense than there was. And and that to me is one of the great contrasts is that Arsenic and Old Lace is so much more suspenseful.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So for those who don't know, Alfred Hitchcock is the master of suspense, but I think I agree with you. Like,
yeah, I mean,
Arsenic and Old Lace does suspense so much better than Trouble with Harry did.
And that's what fascinates me is that if you had said, okay, we're going to watch two movies, both of which are structured around suspense. One of them is directed by Hitchcock. One of them is directed by Frank Capra. One of them is very well done, is a great suspense film. The other one is a disappointment that falls on its face. Which one did which direct? I would have said Hitchcock directed the first one, Capra directed the second, and I would have been completely wrong.
Right. Yeah.
It just fascinates me. And so I find myself wondering, and this is one, I spent so much more time with Trouble with Harry. Part is because I hate to admit this, it was so lacking in suspense at various points, and maybe it's because of when I chose to watch it, I kept falling asleep.
And there were opportunities to. I did keep falling asleep as well, but there were opportunities for it, like where they just don't play it for anything. Like when the captain is first walking away from the body into town, and the sheriff is right there. And he's trying to hide the gun. It's like, okay, you could have done something with that, but he's just walking by, and it's one shot of him hiding the gun behind his leg.
The word that occurs to me that I kept associating with this film was glibness. And the glibness, to me, it's like a vacuum sucking out the tension.
Yeah.
So Albert comes across the body, and he's like, he treats it with all the concern of discovering that he has a car with a flat tire. Yeah. And he's sitting there.
Yeah, to contrast with Cary Grant, like freaking out the entire movie because of this body.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's such a non-concern, and then it gets reinforced when person after person keeps stumbling across the body, and the most natural reaction to this discovery is the kid.
Yeah.
Everyone else is kind of like, as though, oh, I guess here's the body of the day. I guess we're going to deal with this. There's just no sense of this is something
no urgency.
Yeah, there's no tension.
Right.
And every time it seems like we're working towards tension, there's another glib comment and tension's gone. we're back to where we started.
Yeah.
And the fascinating thing about it is you contrast it with Arsenic and Old Lace. It's not just that there's tension there. It's that it's interspersed with these moments where you are in one of those different movies, and yet the tension never fades.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
the different genres? You're saying that it plays like the three different genres?
Like when Mortimer is talking to Elaine and saying to them, we need to end our marriage. The tension is still there. I mean, we're back
the
in the
body's always in that window seat, or it's in the grave downstairs. So.
Or Mortimer, or it's driving Mortimer's anxieties about things. So it's not like, and so we can. It carries forward. We're picking up right where we left off, and I'm inclined to credit the team on that one. That's the writing, the acting, the directing, all coming together.
Yeah, I will put most of the value on the writing on that one, the stage play.
But Cary Grant carries it off so well.
Yeah.
Is that through his performance, he manages to maintain the tension to where when you get to that climactic scene with the fight, that's when he finally relaxes.
Yeah.
And that's where you realize he has been basically playing tension.
Going 100 miles per hour this whole thing.
Exactly. Yeah. He's a live wire from the moment he discovers the body until that point where the police are battling Jonathan. He's kind of like, I'm done. Because he kind of accepts the fact he's got what he wanted. Jonathan's being handled, and things are probably going to work out for the best. But, But we've bounced between the various types throughout the film, and granted, we amp it up I think it helps that you can contrast the scenes between Mortimer and Elaine with Jonathan and Einstein, and there it's just like pure tension. It's like Raymond Massey just constantly muttering like this, and Peter Lorre's sweatiness and unease, and it's just
one thing I didn't mention that isn't really crisscross, but I want to mention here is Peter Lorre as a sympathetic character.
Yes.
They do that really well. I don't know how they did that, but
it's interesting because you're talking about a person who's an accomplice to a serial murderer, who has aided and abetted those crimes, and who himself, it seems it's implied, has blood on his hands.
Yeah.
And yet, when he sneaks off at the end, there's no sense.
You want him to get away.
Yeah, exactly. It's so strange. So, but again, it's not unnatural. It's not atonal.
I think the thing that makes it work is like he doesn't want to be doing any of these things with him, and you can tell he's being bullied into it by this guy, and maybe he would have even just been a normal doctor had he not run into this guy. But
and of course that's also played up by his drinking, which Peter Lorre comes so close to hamming it up, but he manages to kind of just rein it in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it amazes me how that the trouble. Maybe it's the setting,
and it's also that Trouble with Harry almost isn't even a comedy. Like there's one repeating joke of they have to keep burying and unburying him, but that and you can only get so much play out of that.
And I felt like the cleverest joke in the movie was that end title card.
Yeah.
But it also points to maybe, and to kind of build upon what I was saying, maybe the setting has something to do with it, because when you have that claustrophobic focus on the Brewster household, and 95% of the movie happens on that one, in that one place, versus these wide shots, these gorgeous shots of Vermont and people wandering outdoors.
That probably helps the tension, just the one location. Both of them had really clever dialogue, and I think like Trouble with Harry has that in spades.
Oh my gosh.
But it's I think you hit it right on the head. It's witty, but it's not really outright funny.
It's like that's a clever bon mot. I mean, I find myself saying that. But the funny thing was, when I was going back to I was kind of going back through the dialogue. I went to IMDb. I looked at their quotable quotes, and I was going over the quotes, and recognized, pretty much where all of them were. But I felt that while I enjoyed them in the movie, none of them really stood out as being particularly memorable.
Yeah.
And I compare that with Arsenic and Old Lace, where you have similarly witty dialogue, but not only is it funny, it's so memorable. I mean, when we first discussed doing this, the first thought that popped into my head was, insanity doesn't just run in my family, it gallops. I mean, that's such a memorable line.
Yeah, that's good.
And you see those, peppered throughout the movie in a way that just really elevates it. So it makes me feel as though, Trouble with Harry aspires to do what Arsenic and Old Lace does, and yet it falls short in just about every category.
Right. I think the engine that drives Arsenic and Old Lace is that 3-character dynamic of the ants, Cary Grant, and the body. And it's the gift that keeps on giving, because as long as that body is there and he's trying to get rid of it, you've got the frantic slapstickness of Cary Grant, the completely oblivious thinking they're doing the world a favor or doing these men a favor by offing them, and just the more sweet they are, the more funny it is, the more frantic Cary Grant is understanding the whole situation, the funnier it is, and the closer the body gets to being discovered, the funnier it is. So the more you up the suspense, the funnier it's gonna make it. And
you invert that in Trouble with Harry as part of the joke. The running gag of how people keep showing up, and there's Harry, and they're either dismissive of it, oblivious to it. Yeah, they really don't play the tension up, which is surprising, it being a Hitchcock movie. It's like he could have done that to the nines, but I think maybe his focus was on the comedy and he kind of forgot to make it suspenseful. And that's where, I mean, I haven't seen all of Hitchcock's movies. I know he's done one or two other comedies. The one that I'm familiar with is Mr. and Mrs. Smith, but albeit I haven't seen it.
I have yet to see that one.
Now, I mean, I can identify moments in Hitchcock movies that I think are absolutely hilarious. The first one that stands out is 39 Steps, when Robert Donnett's character, whose name escapes me, is giving that political speech, and he's talking about McCrocodile, and it's just so hilariously done. Or
Hitchcock does comedy great. It's in suspense things, and I don't think it's because he's only good at it in small doses. I think it's his suspense that drives the funniness of it.
But as you pointed out, suspense exists in comedy. It's an integral part of it.
Yeah.
I wonder. I'm for me, it's an open question whether or not he can do a full comedy. He can do comedy in his movies. He can do it very well, but can he sustain it? And if the evidence is Trouble with Harry, I would say no, because he can't seem to keep. He can't keep suspense sustained comedy.
I think he just forgot to do suspense. He does it some, but had he played it as much as he usually does, it would be much more funny. Because he usually uses a joke at the end of his suspense scenes in his movies.
Yes.
To release the tension, and it's that much more funny because you've been nervous and on the edge of your seat this whole time. Yeah. You're like, oh.
And it doesn't help the fact that he makes the trade-off. I'm going to trade suspense for comedy in going back to the discovery of the body. And yet it's not very funny. The discovery of the funny, the continual rediscovery of the body. You have those
it's the comedy comes from unexpectedness, and when you keep repeating the same thing over and over again, you're not going to get more laughs. It's humorous, but it's not like you don't get belly laugh type things because it was unexpected. The
most humorous thing that comes out of the discoveries of the body is Shirley MacLaine's dialogue. When she's standing over the body and she's talking about how unlamented Harry will be, and it's it is the funniest thing, and yet it's not even witty. I feel like if
it's just the contrast of a dead body and such a nonchalant reaction to it. And later on, she's like, I don't know why you guys care so much about Harry. Like, you should have just left him buried.
Yeah. And I feel like maybe if the Greenbows tripping over him hadn't been so badly done, or maybe if the tramp had made something more out of it before stealing the shoes, like, oh, this is such a tragedy, can't read death like this as he's pulling off the shoes. I mean, that would have been, funnier.
Yeah.
Than what we get, which is, if you're going to sacrifice suspense for comedy, at least have some comedy that you're getting in the trade.
Yeah. I don't know what happened, but
and this gets to one of the things I think is great about what we do here, because it really helps me to appreciate.
He should have just done a remake of Arsenic and Old Lace, and he'd do that to the nines, because he'd see the suspense in there and play it up as much as Hitchcock possibly could.
Hitchcock's Arsenic and Old Lace would have been brilliant.
Yeah. Maybe even better than the original, like
quite
the
possibly,
originals, and he'd still have Cary Grant, just older.
And it would be, topping the Arsenic and Old Lace, to me is one of the great challenges. To me, it's also one of the reasons why Hollywood should stop constantly making things, because it's virtually impossible to improve upon films of that quality. But if you were to tell me that how might it have been done? You're right. Hitchcock would have been the person I would say might have been able to pull it off. That's where I have to wonder, and I didn't get a chance to read the story on which Trouble with Harry is based. It may have been the source material. It may have been just.
Oh, was it based off a book?
It was a novel that was written by a not entirely successful British author in the 1940s, and Hitchcock optioned it. And I did have a chance to do the comparison, but it was just whatever he did to change the material, it simply wasn't enough. Or maybe it was just that, he...
Well, a lot of times he doesn't even base it that much on the material. He just takes the concept and takes it whatever direction he wants. Yeah. But anyway, this is kind of a sad tone to end our crisscross on. Let's just cover the comedic chops of Cary Grant real quick. I think he does a great job. Like, the slapstickness and the breaking the fourth wall a couple times, like that could be an easy thing to mess up, and a lot of people think of him as like gentleman's gentleman type thing. And it's interesting. He is that in the first act of, Arsenic and Old Lace. As soon as he sees that body, he becomes Mr. Slapstick. Yeah. Until he burns out at the end.
He could turn off and on like a switch.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of the things that really I valued about both movies is the cast of both are just really good.
Yeah.
With the exception of the actor who played Dr. Greenbow in Trouble with Harry.
Right.
It really is a quality cast. And while John Forsythe and Edmund Gwynn don't quite have Grant's comedic chops, I mean, they do.
They're not really doing the same thing though.
Yeah,
like it's
they're not.
Yeah, it's not really slapstick. But
I mean, which is kind of funny because it would have been interesting to maybe do a whole building a film around a dead body thing and do. Maybe instead of one of these films, Weekend at Bernie's, because it is sort of the same thing. We're going to use the dead bodies MacGuffin, but it is interesting how it is something where, and this is the reason why I'm referencing Weekend at Bernie's, there is so much physical comedy built around that premise. And Arsenic and Old Lace really does something with it, and the most you get from it with Trouble with Harry is, oh, I guess we got to dig up the body again.
Yeah.
or Dr. Greenbow tripping over it and completely oblivious, even though it's not like he can't peek, from this very small book he's holding. So
yeah.
I guess we're always going to end on a sour note on Crisscross when it comes to
I guess
talking about these. Or maybe it's just me.
It's you who are the problem.
I am.
No. Okay, so let's get into our star ratings. So let's do Trouble with Harry first. It's not chronological, but
for me, it's 2 out of 5.
Okay,
and it's one of those. To me, this is a classic case where the sum of the film the whole of the film does not equal the sum of its parts. Is that it's what I kept returning to and marveling about when it came to this movie is that the cast is good, the scenery is good, the direction is Hitchcock. There's so the dialogue is witty. There is so much to like about it, and yet I never want to see this film again. And it's not that I will run screaming from it. It's just that I have zero desire to ever commit that hour and a half of my life to watching this film again.
Yeah. Okay, so this is disappointing, but I was going to give it 3 stars, but I'll go to 2.5. Oh, I don't know. I'd say 3 stars because I would want to watch it again.
Let's be honest, though. We have to acknowledge that not everything that even Hitchcock, as great as he is, not every film he did was a banger.
Yeah, that's true. And anyway, so I forgot where I was going.
I apologize.
No, it's okay.
You're talking about 2.5 to 3 stars.
Yeah, so 3 stars for me because I would want to rewatch it. I'd give it a few years just for me to forget what happens in it. But the filmmaking is really good. Like it's like the cinematography with just those fall leaves, like give it just something just to begin with, and I like the atmosphere of it. It's just a little loose, it just doesn't have the suspense of Hitchcock's thrillers, and the comedy apart from suspense is just not there until maybe Act 3 that they use the suspense. But
yeah, and that comes simply from the impending threat of discovery,
right,
by Calvin.
And they play that for the entire thing for Arsenic. So,
but the very fact that it's not rewatchable, because I'm thinking about what you were just saying there, underscores for me why this is 2 stars, and that might be generous because, I mean, I think about all the other Hitchcock films I've seen over the years, and one of the commonalities that constantly stands out for me is how rewatchable they are. I could pop in North by Northwest, Rear Window, 39 Steps, The Lady Vanishes,
Vertigo,
and watch them time and again and again. And to me, to have a Hitchcock film, I'm not expecting all of them to be Vertigo level or Rear Window level, but to not even want to watch this film ever again to me is such a negative statement. And what blows my mind is what I read, and I'm starting to think that maybe this is something that they say for so many of his other films is kind of like a common trope that may not be true. Apparently this was one of his favorites.
Yeah, he was a very humorous man, and he liked comedy, but I just don't think he hit it with this one.
No, that's one of the reasons why I'm really curious now to watch Mr. and Mrs. Smith and to see if this was just simply a misfire, or if there was something that was just missing from his ability to do comedy. Now, you're not going to inflict a crisscross where we compare those two, please, because I've seen enough of trouble with Harry for now. Yeah,
for sure. Okay, so now let's do Arsenic and Old Lace.
4 stars.
Okay.
For me, I don't know. I mean, it is so close to being 5. I might even on a slightly different day push up to 5. Maybe it's just the fact that it's missing Boris Karloff for me. But I mean, it is such a wonderful film.
Yeah,
and it is one of those ones where to get a contrast of trouble with Harry, I've seen it half a dozen times. I found myself enjoying it. When I did it on the rewatch, even though I knew so many of the lines were coming, I knew how the plot would develop. It's just that to me is the hallmark of for me it's the fundamental criteria of a great film is I will watch it again and again and again and enjoy it. Maybe not in the same way, maybe not to the same degree, but it is still an enjoyable moving experience. And that to me is the essence of Arsenic and Old Lace.
Yeah, so I would give it 5 stars because I have to admit it is. This is like a foundational movie for me.
Yeah.
I watched it when I was 10 and got freaked out by it, but. Aside from that, I actually Googled it because of that. I searched for body on the windowsill, and it came up body on the window seat, Arsenic and Old Lace, and I'm like, oh. And I watched it, I think when I was in my teens, and just fell in love with it. And it's the comedy. And now that I know what suspense is, it runs off of suspense. And I think I just realized that it's usually suspense functions with you knowing more than the main character knows. But in this one, most of the suspense comes from him knowing more than the ants know of the implications of what they've done. And he's just frantic this entire movie.
And you get that traditional suspense model, I think, maybe with Jonathan, in the sense that we know by the time he shows up, everything that's going on.
Yeah, and we don't want him to find out.
And yet he gradually finds out over the course of the movie and then tries to use that to his advantage.
Yeah. It's great. It's like a Swiss watch of writing, especially comedy writing and suspense. Like
there is not a bad performance in that. I mean, even some of the actors, like the actor who plays Officer O'Hara, I don't know exactly. I can't remember off the top of my head what his name is.
Yeah, unsung hero.
Yeah, I mean, he was. I mean, this was probably his biggest role, and yet he does such a great job, especially the scene where he's recounting the plot to a gagged Cary Grant and the action in the background. He's just really. It's just so amazing.
Yeah.
And I think there maybe some of the credit should go also to Capra in terms of the fact that he really did a great job of getting great performances out of his cast.
Yeah. And just thinking about that, the fact that he's gagged there as he's explaining, it's like you can tell that the writer used every opportunity to use this for suspense. It's like, okay, we did the suspense scene where he gets gagged. Now that he is gagged, how can we use this? He's got to listen to this guy's play, and this danger is coming up behind him, and he can't tell him about it.
And where you communicate that, I think, most effectively is in the smallest way possible, which is Cary Grant's eye expression with his eyes.
Yeah,
because he's sitting there, he's gagged, he's sweating, he's
trying
bound
to gesture behind him.
Yeah, but where he really could see it is how he fluctuates those eyes.
Yeah,
that to me is a testament to him as an actor.
Yeah.
But also the fact that Capra does such a great job. He could zoom in there and just do the eyes. Which some directors could do, and it might have worked in a moment or two, but he manages to keep it to where he trusts Grant to do it on his own,
right?
And Grant proves him correct.
Yeah, he blows it away. Yeah, so it's kind of disappointing that the Hitchcock one wasn't up to par, but yeah, Arsenic and Old Lace is a classic. So if you'd like to get access to bonus features and deleted clips from Crisscross and our sister show Facets of Story, please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/transcendentertainment. That's TRANSCEND Entertainment. And that's it for today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Crisscross Cinema Podcast.
But you wouldn't clap yet, because making something disappear isn't enough. You have to bring it